clinical deserves a gold star. This is an amazing study. So good on you. I will totally champion this product. No problem.
Yes. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Chemist Confessions podcast. I'm Gloria.
I'm Victoria.
And this is a human conversation on all the skincare science we talk about on the daily. And today is kind of a continuation from last week's conversation on what we should be doing differently skincare-wise as we age. And it's a pretty juicy one. It's all about the role of estrogen and topical estrogen in skincare.
Yeah, another really popular question. There's definitely a segment of our listeners and followers that have been wondering about this realm. And also it's definitely become, I wouldn't say like a hot trend, but definitely something that's been picking up in terms of skincare. Gore and I have seen some very interesting claims targeting post-menopausal phase of skin. So we're going to just dive right into that and ultimately answer the question, does topical estrogen help in this phase of life? So we should just jump right into it. Let's go through a little bit of skin bio especially, and the role of estrogen.
Like anything hormone, I think the role of estrogen in skin as a whole is a little bit complex. So a lot of the studies are around basically the symptoms that comes with menopause when your estrogen level really dips down. Now, even though estrogen is a systemic internal thing, your skin does have estrogen receptors as well. And a lot of the symptoms that it's associated with is skin dryness. A lot of women who's peri or post-menopause will experience this intense dryness of skin that feels like nothing topical really works. And this isn't just facial skin. It can be all over body. Also, your vaginal skin may also experience a lot of irritation. So they looked into it a little bit more deeply in terms of just what exactly, like biologically speaking, is happening to your skin when your estrogen level dips down.
Like all other skin concerns, mechanisms, there are a lot of times mainly theories. And we would say that estrogen's impact on skin is a realm that still needs a lot more research. And we can definitely say that this realm is picking up, we would say now, but in terms of the historical data, there's really just needs more, we just need a general better understanding. However, what we can tell you is that in our skin, there are actually two estrogen receptors. There is what they call they're the alpha and the beta receptors. Now, in terms of how estrogen impacts skin and its part it plays in skin health, we can tell you that estrogen can help retain and restore skin moisture. This is through the actual promotion and regulating of growth factors. Consider these more as signaling molecules that they're essentially going to promote the general production of sebum and also make sure that the general materials in skin are being regulated well. So one of the things that they've even marked is that the level of mucopolysaccharides and hyaluronic acid, so think the actual natural humectants in skin, these have also been tied to estrogen, which I found to be kind of neat.
Yeah, and if you think about it, it totally makes sense. This is also why, on the flip side, acne is associated with puberty. When your sex hormones first spike, sebum production tends to be affected. And while this is definitely it's an even stronger effect in males with testosterone, but estrogen in females work in very similar ways when it comes to sebum levels. So it makes sense that on the other end of it, when you go through menopause and estrogen level dips down, your skin sebum level dips down. And like Victoria mentioned, the hyaluronic acid and some of this like natural occurring compounds that keep skin more moist starts to dip down as well. And this you can see, you see the end result of this in a previous podcast episode where we referenced a Chinese statistical study and that showed that women in their 60s and 70s tend to have a huge dip in terms of skin hydration. And this is why.
Yeah, and now the other part of that is obviously the anti-aging part. You hear about the loss of collagen production and things like that. And what we can tell you is that what they've definitely tied estrogen to generally its impact on our skin structure. You can already hear from a moisturizer hydration part that change happens, and that can obviously also partner with the impact towards things like collagen and elastin, and that kind of leads to that general change in appearance and the, increase in things like wrinkles and general loss of elasticity. So we would say this is obviously a pretty general description of what's going on. Hopefully this gives you an idea of why estrogen is looked at topically.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we definitely want to answer in the next section, what exactly does ingredients like topical estradiol or estriol do for skin? And is that something that is actually helpful for this phase of our lives as females?
Yep. So, but before that, we're going to take a quick break and blah, blah, blah.
Today, we're not talking about product because we have to mention that the second generation of Skincare Decoded is finally here. The book we never thought we'd write, the book we never thought we'd touch again. Turns out a few people liked it and the second generation was born. So if you're curious about what's changed, well, it's still got all of the original content that you love, a focus on the key players, cleanse, moisturize, sun protect, the big 4 actives, and a shopping guide. But what's new is we've got more sunscreen content focusing on sunscreen application and a dedicated section to eye creams. We've also got updated visuals, references, and a few typo fixes.
So if you've been waiting for the book to come back, which has definitely taken a while, your long wait has been rewarded with an even better Chemist Guide to Skincare. Head over to Amazon to pick up your copy or snag your own copy in our Chemist Wonderland holiday bundle.
All right, guys, we're back. Let's get into topical estradiol and estriol. Do they actually work for post-menopausal skin? So first things first, what is the difference between the two? Just know that both of these are actually forms of estrogen. However, estradiol is actually the dominant form of estrogen throughout the majority of our lives, whereas estriol is actually the dominant form of estrogen when we're pregnant. They actually call this the pregnancy hormone. It's considered the weaker hormone, and it's used as an alternative, as a more gentle, possibly safer. But we're going to get into what safer actually means in this section. So let's get into it.
Yeah, to start, we should mention that topical estradiol and estriol are not very new. They've actually been testing this for decades now. Some of the oldest papers come from the 70s, 80s. So there's been a lot of work in this arena, and we should mention that all of this is under prescription care, at least in the US. What that means is when topicals have this long history, means review papers that you have to work for us. And then we happen to find a pretty good one that kind of lays out everything that's been done from like the 80s all the way to the 2000s. And as you can see, this has been tested topically over and over again. This isn't something that just goes from oral to off and to a vaguely logical translation to topical evidence. Topical estrogen has been tested. And I'll just put the general chart up there. It's hard to see because there's a lot of papers to go off of. But I just want to highlight a couple of key studies here before we get into a couple interesting ones we found. Between estradiol and estriol, I think when you do research in this category, you'll see a lot of talks about between the difference between estradiol and estriol. And there's definitely that rhetoric of like estradiol is the better one because, like Victoria mentioned, estriol is considered the weaker estrogen. But the reality is, topically, there's actually a lot of data comparing the two at just different levels. Yes, comparative data. This is what happens when you have decades of testing. So estriol is used at 0.3%, while estradiol is used at 0.01%. And when used at that level, a lot of studies seem to show that it's fairly on par in terms of performance.
First of all, this is a really good sign in a realm where we just don't have a lot in skincare. But definitely want to point out a couple comparative studies here. This was done back in 94 and 96, where they actually looked at 0.3% estriol versus 0.01% estradiol. Now, the first one that was done in 94, this is very small. They only did it on 18 subjects. But we should point out that this study was actually done for 6 months.
Very long.
Yeah, and we can tell you that if you scroll through this nice summary of data, you'll see that for the most part, this duration that they test is a lot longer than probably what you guys are used to. I think there are some that go for as long as a year, which is good news, but also should give you a sense of timeline and length of time you might be using these products for. In terms of results that we're seeing, they were actually targeting anti-aging skin concerns such as firmness, elasticity, vascularization, moisture, wrinkle depth, and pore size. In terms of both groups, they did see both did see a general improvement. However, in this study, they did mention that topical estriol groups at the 0.3% were slightly superior to those of estradiol group. They mention that, and when they say slightly, that usually means it's not significant. So probably for the most part, these two percentages are on par. But let's take a look at the second one. The second one, same thing. They're looking at 0.01% estradiol versus 0.3% estriol, testing it for the same time length of 6 months. Subject size is a lot bigger. You're looking at 59 subjects at a time. I say a lot, it's just bigger. But they had subjects apply it on face and neck. Mm-hmm. And they did see that elasticity and firmness on skin were significantly improved, as well as wrinkle depth and pore size for both treatments. They actually looked at type 3 collagen as well, did find an increase in both groups. So just with these two studies, as an intro, this is obviously not enough data. We're just running through a couple comparisons. You can see that for the most part, these two concentrations can be considered comparable. So generally good signs.
Yeah. And there's a lot more than what we're highlighting here, but these are just ones that we think are interesting and have good takeaways. Mm-hmm. The studies didn't stop in the 90s. There's a study in early 2000s that looked at 0.01 estradiol compared with a placebo. And they're able to measure epidermal thickness increase significantly by 23% when compared to the control. And they also measure things like epidermal thickness. And something else to note when I went through this review paper and these studies is what's interesting is a lot of the papers don't just look at things that's more, I guess, external result of because of the estrogen. It's not things like hydration or wrinkles appear to be less, though some of them do look at that. A lot of them straight up took biopsies. And that's why you hear phrases like epidermal thickness improved or collagen level went up. These are all more in-depth looks at skin, which when we cover our other episodes on other topicals, not all of them do these types of studies. But on the flip side, we also see very few studies that talked about the cosmetic end result of estrogen creams. It just seems like after all these time, things tend to trend better, but not so much. But it's hard to tell like what how you feel about skin in that time. One other really interesting study I want to call out here is done in 2008. This one is the complete opposite of these 6-month studies we just shared. It's only for 2 weeks and actually tested a bunch of different levels of estradiol from the standard 0.01 all the way up to 2.5. But that's not what I want to discuss here. What they did was they actually tested on the forearm and the hip. So as part of skin that's naturally exposed to sun on a regular, just as we live, versus a part of skin that's very rarely exposed to sun directly. Their whole the whole point of this paper is kind of to show that how does photoaging come into play when it comes to topical estrogen. And in this really short duration study, they actually showed that all levels of estradiol was able to increase collagen production, and they actually showed that it was able to boost collagen production for hip skin, so for skin that is not photo damaged, whereas that same effect isn't observed on the forearm and face. So because it's a really short study, I think it's not to say that topical estrogen wouldn't work on your face. It's kind of to show that how important sun protection is, because if your skin comes with photo damage already, this one paper does seem to suggest that it has an even harder time taking up anything signaling.
I actually wanted to add to that is that just not within this review paper, but there are several of there out there that debate, what is the goal of estradiol topically and the types of aging, photo aging, chrono aging. I think what's reassuring for me as I went through this is that they are looking at this in a very analytical way, in a much better way than most anti-aging ingredients. And aside from this clinical, there's been multiple mentions of how estradiol is meant specifically for chrono aging, and when they mean chrono aging, post-menopausal aging versus photo aging. They see that there is a discrepancy, and I actually really like that, because a lot of times what happens with anti-aging research is it all just gets lumped in and smashed together, and they're just looking at the final skin concern, which is wrinkle. I don't care how you got the wrinkle. I don't care what that is. It's just the wrinkle, or that pigmentation that you got. And so I really liked how analytical some of these aspects they were trying to look at through some of this research.
That's a great point. And then I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, because when you do product research, a lot of companies that sell these creams will actually suggest, hey, you can use this alongside, say, a tretinoin. And tretinoin is, or like vitamin A in general, is tested very specifically for photoaging aspects of skin. And it kind of does make a lot of sense that these two are tackling aging from very, very different angles. And you're absolutely right. I don't think chronoaging is an arena people that's usually separated out from photoaging. And I think the vast majority of research is dedicated to photoaging.
Yeah, I mean, how many clinicals, and I'm sure, Gloria, we can also talk about like when you're curating clinical studies, they all get lumped in as looking at photoaging concerns.
Yes.
But that is not necessarily, if you want to get really technical, like that's not actually looked at as critically as, let's say, even in that clinical you just shared. Like a lot of times it's like, I don't think they're actually making that differentiation of what is photoaging and what is chronoaging, you know? So,
yeah. So all those are and there are a lot more. There are a lot of other studies that I didn't cover that tends to look at just, say, forearm or patches or even in vitro studies. I did pull the paper that Victoria mentioned from 96 to look at more in more detail. Just a quick refresher, this was done for 6 months. There's about 30 test subjects per group. Group 1 used 0.01% estradiol. Group 2 uses 0.3% estriol cream. And just to reiterate, the average age here is 53. And all the study participants are at least peri or post-menopausal. And I'm just going to read the results super quickly. They say that after treatment, elasticity and firmness of skin has markedly improved, and wrinkle depth and pore size have decreased from 61 to 100% in both groups. The 61 to 100% seems a little bit out there, but sure. They also did biopsy. On the immunohistochemical side, significant increase in type 3 collagen labeling were combined with increased number of collagen fibers at the end of the treatment period. And what's really nifty and what I should point out from the review paper is all these longer term topical studies, they are required to draw blood from the subjects and measure the blood hormone level. And they show that their internal levels have no systemic effects from the topical treatment. So if you're worried about estrogen getting in your bloodstream and somehow having further implications than intended, it has been shown over and over again that that's not how topicals work here. And I really wanted to pull this study because of two things. One is this study showed that there is no side effects. There's no irritation. There is no onboarding period. This is as topical estrogen is pretty mild to use for all subjects. Of the review paper, they also mentioned that of all the studies that's been done, there's no cases, barely any cases of sensitization. And they actually included a before-after picture. Victoria, how do we feel about the before-after picture?
I mean, the lady looks like she took it from two different ages. Like, like aside from clearly the same style of applying eyeliner and the eye shape, I'd be like, this was taken in 2 different decades. Like, I do not believe.
yeah, 100%. So one of the things I find to be super interesting about this research is it's very scientifically rigorous, right? There's a lot, there's biopsies, immunohistostaining, there is collagen measurement, even mRNA markers, all that stuff. But very, very, very few things to go off of in terms of the cosmetic expectations. When we were talking about more hydrating, how much more hydrating? When we were talking about less wrinkles, how much? This was the only picture I can pull. I pulled probably like half a dozen papers. This was the only one I can pull. And like Victoria mentioned, and for our audio listeners, it's a black and white picture that's very zoomed in on the eye area. Because it's black and white, I can't really tell if it's taken in a very controlled setting or if it's like a Polaroid camera. But it basically looked like her crow's feet went from something you might expect in your 60s level of crow's feet to no crow's feet. Like if I told you based on the after picture that this woman's in her 40s, you'd be like, okay, that looks about right.
Yeah, exactly. And granted, this study was done in 96. So the instrumentation back then, I mean, it's understandable. It's not to knock like the tool, like, you know, their abilities. But yeah, it's wild. And it has me wondering, I'm like, you know, really dry skin. Like if you have really dry skin and you can solve your hydration issues, I'm like,
that goes far.
I mean, yeah, that can go pretty far. Can it go this far? I'm not sure because this is a wild, wild change, but I can't imagine it can go pretty far.
I'll be honest, like doing what we do, and as someone that has by default pretty dry skin, I'm like, oh, I am not ready for that post-menopause like extra dryness. But I will say,
Yeah.
like Victoria mentioned, like we always preach that cleanse, moisturize, sun protection is the pillars of 90% of your skin needs. As someone with dry skin, like before you dive into the actives, just look at what just moisturizing can do. Make sure your skin barrier is in tip-top shape.
Yeah, for sure. I also really like the table that you shared here, just because of a few things. One is looking at, the general improvement across the subjects, I think is always an important stat that doesn't often get shared. And the reason why we like this stat is because you can have a subject scenario where a couple have like fantastic improvement and the rest really don't have great improvement, and that can really skew the results that you're seeing. It's just funny to me because it's like pore size is always that one that you're just like, I don't really know. Like it's just like
why, but it's there.
It's the hardest one, I would say, of all the skin concerns to really get good data. It's like really tough.
Yeah. Oh, now that I totally forgot about this chart, but now that Victoria brought it up, I pulled this chart because I find it to be mildly humorous. Because, so first of all, like Victoria mentioned, the number of subjects that show improvement is a very important metric for us. And on the estradiol side, almost everyone showed improvement in terms of vascularization, skin elasticity, firmness, and moisture, which is expected to be the main concerns that this can target. And wrinkle depth, 87% of people show improvement. Pore size, 73% of the subjects showed improvement. On the estriol side, it's honestly pretty on par. 96% show improvement in vascularization, elasticity, firmness, and moisture. 89% show wrinkle depth, and 61% show improvement in pore size. I think it's humorous because I'm sitting here like, is it the same one person in that show group that showed no improvement across the board? That person got shafted.
Yes, that's exactly correct. That's what I was feeling.
I was like, oh no, to be the one person in the group like, my skin's fine after 6 months and didn't do anything great.
Yeah, I know. Rough. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so all those studies we just find to be interesting and kind of, it paints a good picture as to what it does, which is to improve skin barrier function, and that topical estrogen does work. I will say one of the key takeaway here is the biggest positive is in all of our years, in all the years that Victoria and I have been doing content, there are very few arenas where people will look very specifically at aged skin, at peri and post-menopausal skin. Some anti-aging studies, that age group might bleed into that realm, but usually it will also go down and include people in their late 30s and 40s. So of all the topicals, we would say it's definitely worth trying if you're in the age bracket because so few topicals look at that more mature skin type.
In terms of safety of these topical hormones, we should mention that all of the controversy really starts from around the early 2000s. Basically, what happened is there was a hormone therapy clinical trial that was being run. This was actually being run by the NIH, and it actually was stopped midway. And because of that study in particular, a lot of fear was generated and a knee-jerk reaction happened where suddenly no one wanted to prescribe hormone therapy for perimenopausal women because they were so afraid of potential adverse side effects. But what we can tell you is, one, remember that this clinical trial, they were actually doing, they were offering oral hormones, and this was not just for topical skincare. This was actually for other symptoms of menopause. And two, remember that this is topical application of estradiol and estriol. This is very far removed from this original clinical trial. So hopefully that gives you some historical context as to like where the misunderstanding comes from. So ultimately, all that to say is, if you are generally concerned and you feel like you've read something that might make you feel like this is, you're not sure whether or not this is right for you, the good thing is this is a prescription. And in order to get a prescription, that means you need to have a conversation with your doctor. And your doctor will ultimately be the one to tell you if this is the best solution for you, given your not only your skin history, but your health history and your general family history regarding your health. So Yeah, we just don't feel like this should be a general reason not to consider this avenue.
Yeah, 100%. And just to wrap it all up too, all the studies we share, like we briefly mentioned, in these studies, the women are only doing topical estrogen and not doing more systemic hormonal therapies. And it shows that topically, and they do draw blood regularly to see blood estrogen level and check on it all the time. Topically, it doesn't affect your blood estrogen level. Obviously, other than topical estrogen, there are other forms of hormone therapies, and all of this, including topical estrogen, like Victoria mentioned, is a conversation to be had with your doctor. So that about wraps up the meat. We'll take a quick break before we come back and talk about topical estrogen product you can consider.
It's time for the Animal Fun Fact Corner, and today is my turn. And
Yay!
I don't know why, but we keep talking about birds. Sorry, Gloria. So I've got another bird to share.
Victoria's the in-house bird expert now.
I know. I'm going to make 2025. We're going to move away from birds. We need there's a new animal group out there.
Bring back termites.
Divorce and termites. All right. Okay, so today we are going to talk about a bird called the Hoatzin. This is a very unusual looking bird. And for all of our audio listeners, imagine a pheasant looking body, but the head of like a almost dinosaur looking bird. It's got a blue face, and then it's got kind of like a mohawk of not even feathers.
Very intensive.
Yeah.
Mohawk.
It's kind of an archaic looking bird if I were to describe it. So the Hoatzin. All right. This bird has been found in the swamps and the mangroves of the Amazonian rainforest. All right. But what I found to be unique is how they process their diet. I think last time we talked about a bird that would face the sun to try to use that warmth to help them digest.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This bird, because of where it lives in the wetlands, they have to resort to eating a lot of leaves in the mangroves, but these leaves are incredibly difficult to break down. So another issue where their diet can be like very harsh. The thing about them is that they have this, what they call like a crop, and this crop is essentially an extension of their stomach, okay? It's literally would be the end of their like esophagus area. And this crop area is actually what they use to actually ferment their food and help break it down. Pretty much like a cow, okay? So the unique thing is because of this part of their digestive system, they're very efficient at digesting their food. So they actually can digest up to 70% of this matter that they eat that's actually very harsh, okay? Because they don't have teeth, they just have a beak, right? So they can't really like chew to break it down. So what happens is when it hits their crop, that's why they need the fermentation, but it causes them to burp. So they burp and they produce methane. Okay, so really like a cow.
Very cattle-like all around.
Very cattle-like. It takes them 45 hours to have food pass through their body. It's quite slow. But because of this process, they smell. They actually are described as have a disagreeable manure-like odor. They're actually called the stink bird. And they're only hunted by humans. This is pulled straight from Wikipedia, in dire needs. Okay. So they can say that if you eat this, there's things that because of what they consume, eating them would cause a lot of discomfort and possibly dangerous to a human. So anyways, if you're wondering, there is a bird out there in the Amazonian rainforest that burps and stinks and is not edible. So there you have it. That's the Hoatzin.
So if you're in the rainforest and you feel like one of your companions have cut the cheese, you can actually blame it on the birds.
Yeah, you can blame it on the bird. There's a bird out there that doesn't smell great.
Yay, stinky bird.
Stinky bird. It's the stink bird.
All right, let's wrap it up with products you can buy that contains estrogen. Like we mentioned, a lot of this is prescription. So, but nowadays with a lot of telederm type of work, there are some brands out there that you can actively search for and pursue just online. And if you Google estrogen face cream, there are 3 that comes up. And they actually happen to represent what we think of as 3 different tiers of product you can see in this category. The first one is the Alloy M4 face cream. This one uses 0.3% estriol, so in line with all the studies we shared during the meet, they actually did their own clinical test, benching it against a 0.01% estradiol. They did, yes, a group, they did their own clinical. Yep, they did 30 per group and for 12 weeks. They measure hydration with a corneometer and show that both groups show an par level of improvement. N equals 30 per group for 3 groups. So it is the 0.3% alloy estriol cream in one group, a 0.01% estradiol cream, and also a placebo. So like
Juicy.
Triple threat here. Yes. So yes, they measure hydration with a corneometer and show on par improvement between the estriol and estradiol group, but they didn't see improvement in the placebo group. They showed that what's interesting here is that they actually showed that elasticity wasn't affected, but I should mention that this is a more standard cosmetic styled cosmetic length clinical that's only done for 12 weeks, whereas in the papers we found it's done for 6 months. So clearly this is something that might take a little longer. And they also did expert evaluation and show on par improvement between the 2 estrogen groups in terms of radiance and skin roughness. And again, there is no unwanted side effects. And what I find to be really neat for the study that we didn't cover in the meat section is they mentioned very specifically that there is no change in unwanted age-related pigmentation, which is often thought about as a potential side effect of topical hormones.
This clinical deserves a gold star. This is an amazing study. So good on you, Alloy. I will totally champion this product. No problem.
Yes, it is an easy one to root for. They thought of everything, thought of a little bit more than we even think of. I think I would have been happy if it's just bench against a placebo, but I went the extra mile and benched against the estradiol. So definitely a good one you can consult your doctors for. I believe they also can connect you with the Telederm for this cream. Next, we have Muesli. Muesli also uses a 0.3% estriol cream. They also talk about how this cream also has vitamin C and HA, and it's a unique blend of ingredients, blah, blah, blah. But no studies have been done on muesli. They're just relying on estriol being a prescription ingredient and the coattails of other people's study. I think this is a more, probably more standard approach, I would say. But compare with the alloy, I will have to root for the alloy who actually tested their specific product.
Also, I was just going to mention that alloy, the general price range is around $50. And then muesli, you're looking at around $33. I don't find that price point to be that wide in gap. I was expecting pharmaceutical price range every time you get a clinical like that. But so for me, I think there's a clear winner. I think, let's be real. Like, we're all using vitamin C and a vitamin C serum. We don't necessarily need that in addition to, the estriol here. So I wouldn't use that as like a clear deciding factor in choosing one or the other.
Yeah, 100%. Lastly, if you Google estrogen-based cream, this comes up. It's a brand called Impel. Its position, and I should mention, it is clinically tested for older women who are peri or post-menopausal, but it does not contain estrogen or estradiol. It's actually positioned as a moisturizing cream for older women without the estrogen. It's actually a retinol and peptide blend, which I should mention that retinol, it is important to shout it from the roof, this is retinol. So if you're not used to it, you still need onboarding times and all the typical disclosures, yada yada yada. I just find it to be a little bit like it's just a thing to take note, right? This type of stuff comes up, but just give it another read.
Slightly misleading. We should mention that, if the objective is to treat the symptoms of peri and postmenopause, this is not really the goal for that, even though the clinical does probably target these women. If anything, my takeaway would be keep up the retinol during this period while you're using your topical estriol estradiol, that would be my takeaway.
Yeah, so to sum this episode up, if you're in that age range, estriol or estradiol creams are definitely worth exploring. You should talk to your doctors about it, especially if you're suffering from severe dryness.
Yeah.
I should mention that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it like that, but there are some forums and some blogs. Oh, hi. Hello. Okay, say hi. Okay, you don't want to say hi. Anyway. I have seen some forums where women in their 40s have talked about exploring this realm. I haven't seen anything that suggests that women that are much younger or you're pre-menopause should think about it. I didn't see anything, any testing that shows that it can be beneficial from a preventative angle.
Yeah.
So I probably wouldn't think about it like that at all.
Totally agree. I think that it's very clear they are the specificity of how they're testing. We should stay within the specificity of the age range that is defined. So definitely try. And ultimately, if you don't have to listen to us, go ahead and ask your derm or your OB. And finally, I think there is something we should also mention is, a lot of the studies we share, they might sound like they're, from 20 years ago. We do share what we find to be the most relevant, or we find the clinical test to be done really well. But we will say that we, as mentioned before, this category is starting to pick up in research again.
Yeah.
I think they're starting to realize, like, a lot of women out there are being like, hey, what about me? You guys are forgetting about me. So that's a really good sign. They're actually exploring more of the isoflavones. So you might hear about the hormone-like ingredients that are coming from like things like soy. So we would say that this realm, there's definitely buzz. There's definitely testing, but a lot of it still is pretty new. And this is general territory that Gloria and I are keeping tabs on. And we will share in the near future. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Yeah. Last but not least, if you already have an estrogen cream in your routine or you're thinking about adding one.
Sorry, you can hear Kumo purring into the mic. Everyone's like, ooh, what is that vibrating?
That is my gato. Anyway, come on, chill. Last but not least, this seems topical estrogen seems pretty mild, pretty vanilla.
Mhm.
There's nothing preventing you from using it alongside all your other topicals.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, a lot of brands and a lot of papers will champion actually using both the retinoids to target photo aging and the topical estrogen to combat chrono aging aspects. So that's a go. And I think that before my cat chews up my mic, that about sums up this episode. We should mention that next episode is the last episode of the year.
We did it. We made it to the end.
Yeah, so let us know how you feel about the content this year. Let us know what you want us to talk about next year. We might do a couple of Victoria and I are gonna go on hiatus after the sum up episode, but we are already brainstorming about next year, what we want to keep the same, what we want to do differently.
Yeah.
So let us know your thoughts down below as well. So where can they find us, Victoria?
Yeah, so if you have a lot of feels about the podcast, email us at info@chemistconfessions.com. Check out our Instagram, chemist.confessions, where we poll you guys, honestly, for right now, a lot of ideas for what's to come. And then finally, we are on TikTok. We don't DM us there, And then finally, you can also just comment below. What do you want to see next year? So otherwise, stay tuned for the last episode. We will see you guys next time. Bye.